Hey guys, OG Albine here, bringing you guys another sort of discussion tier listing video. If you remember, a couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago, honestly, at this point, we did a tier list video, kind of ranking GL Tier 1 Pokemon, via their viability, how good they are in the tier, whether they're a first round pick or not, that kind of thing. And I kind of want to do the same thing for Tier 2. I, again, took this idea from Dr. Slacking. This is his tier list. And DM me in the tier list, so I didn't have to make it this time. So, shouts to him. Definitely go check out his video on the subject as well. And I think Jack or Gray did. So, I'll probably link his down there below too. So, both did Tier 2 before I did. But if you know me, Tier 2 is one of my favorite tiers. I usually have the most success with these mods. I think there's some unsung heroes in this tier. Some really slept on beasts, so I'm looking to kind of talk about those today and stuff like that. So yeah, without further ado, let's jump into it. We're basically just going to be talking about how much I like these Pokemon in Tier 2 and how much value I think they really give a team, and what roles they can kind of fill, and just discuss a little bit as we go. So let's go ahead and jump in. First up, we have Galarian Weezing. This is a Pokemon I've been able to try out a few times here in Generation 8, and I know a lot of people think it's a little overhyped. I do agree, but I still think it is a firmly cemented, at least in this metagame, as a tier, C tier in the Tier 2 rankings. I think it offers a lot of defensive utility. I love the versatility that it offers and its different abilities, all three of which being amazing for League format. Misty Surge definitely has its uses, especially if you draft some terrain abusers and things like that. Excuse me. Levitate, obviously great. Being a poison type, you can, avoid that whole ground type weakness, which is amazing for it. And then the neutralizing gas is very, very nice in specific situations. I've seen some really cool scarf sets to, pick off on Bird and Hawlucha and a bunch of really cool things. I think this thing has a lot of utility. Offensively, it has good coverage while not being the strongest thing in the world. It can pack a decent punch, and its dual stabs plus like flamethrower and things like that. You do have access to Toxic Spikes, you do have access to Defog and Pain Split and Will-O-Wisp and a bunch of cool things like that. You can be a grounded poison while being off the ground, which I think is also very, very nice and very versatile, because if you're like, oh man, I lose to T-Spikes this week, you can kind of circumvent that and, be able to run that grounded poison this week and things like that, which is obviously really cool. So I think Weezing does have good utility. I think it's a little overhyped. It's not as bulky as you'd like it to be in some instances. It doesn't have great reliable recovery. And you are kind of forced into certain sets in certain leagues, which is a bit unfortunate, but I do think it's still pretty solid, at least in this metagame. I could honestly see it dropping potentially to a Tier 3 Pokemon in like a less limited dex, but still very good. Next up, Starmie. And I think Starmie is 100% at least A tier. I might move it up to S. I love this thing. I think it's great, especially with the rapid spin buff, it getting the speed boost. Nothing but, benefits for it there. But obviously, it's a really reliable spinner. It hits a great speed tier, which I think is really important in a Galar dex meta. Having something past that 110 mark, around that 115 where Starmie is sitting, is really, really important for some good speed control. It has great offensive coverage. It has recover for reliable recovery. Cool reflect type sets are always an option. This thing's really versatile. It got flip turn, so now it has access to momentum, which is also really, really clean, just to chip and whittle things down, especially on like scarf sets or even spec sets and things like that. I can see that really being nice, or just bulkier sets with like Scald, rapid spin, flip turn, recover, or something like that, or even psychic, just being a general nuisance to teams. It can be deceptively bulky as well. While people kind of shit on Starmie a little bit just because of its lackluster bulk as a spinner, because of how fast it is in certain matchups, you can definitely be a lot bulkier, and Starmie, definitely does that really, really well. So I think it's a very, very solid Pokemon. Really do like it. Great offensively, has great defensive utility as well. Now, next up, we have Gyarados, and this Pokemon's iffy for me. I really do like Gyarados. I love Mega Gyarados, one of my favorite Pokemon to use in Gen 7. I think it's incredibly versatile, it's so strong, and it's a great Pokemon. Regular Gyarados, though, is a bit iffy. It doesn't have a great falling stab, unfortunately, so you're stuck with bounce as your physical stab, but it does have great coverage. Other than that, Waterfall and Earthquake and Ice Fang and things of that sort. You do have access to decent special coverage as well, so if you're playing that Ferrothorn, you can hit it with a Flamethrower or a Fire Blast, which is pretty cool as well. Dragonite is an option. It's a good Taunt Mon as well. Like, Taunt DD is really, really scary. It has good offensive coverage, though. It has a little bit of a lackluster speed tier, and it's not a mon that can really run Moxie too often, in my opinion. I think it has decent natural bulk, but a lot of the time you want to use it as that Intimidate buffer to give yourself that option to potentially step and sweep. But I think the advent of boots on this thing is really nice as well. So I think I want to put it in B for now. We'll put it at the top of B because I do think it's a little bit overrated, and it's very matchup dependent on how well it's going to do, and that's a big thing for me. I want a Pokemon that I can splash into most matchups and have a different set for it every time. So we're gonna keep Gyarados right there in B tier. We might move it up. We might have it at the top of B tier by the end. We might have it at the bottom. Who knows? I'm going into this completely blind, by the way. Next up, Polytone. So Polytone, obviously, same with Pelipper right down the line. And I guess we can kind of talk about both of them. We'll talk about Polytone first. Now we'll talk about Pelipper first. So the reason I want to talk about Pelipper first is because I think it's a little bit better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tier one above... Oops. Yeah, screw it. We'll talk about this one next. One above the other. We're going to put Polytone in C. We're going to put it at the top of C, though. I think it's a little bit better than... no. We're going to keep it at the bottom. But they're literally only here because of their rain capabilities. You take rain away from these Pokemon, they're not that good. I mean, look at Pelipper, who's known as one of the worst Pokemon in standard Pokemon tiers, just like as a whole, prior to it getting Drizzle. So obviously there's a huge buff for it, and its defensive typing is pretty solid, especially with the advent of boots. Now, I'm using Pelipper right now in the BBR as a part of a raid team, and I've enjoyed it pretty well. I think it's nice. It's bulky enough to check things in need to. I think you're forced into boots a lot more than you would really like to be in order to check things defensively that you need to be, which can be a little bit unfortunate on rain where you want to hold Darebrock and things like that. But you could say the same thing to Polytone on a similar extent to where it wants to hold like a lefties or, you know, some kind of barrier or something like that. But honestly, if you're drafting rain, I don't think you should be drafting full rain anyway. So I've noticed a lot of time I don't even need Darebrock to, you know, potentially, you know, utilize it. And the main thing that I think makes Pelipper better than Polytone, yes, it gets access to Defog, which is really nice. The dual stabs is really scary to switch into for those grass types and things like that. But the biggest thing for me personally that makes Pelipper a lot better is the advent of having the option of U-turn, being able to U-turn on out and catch, you know, potential switch-ins, get into your rain sweepers a little bit nicer. Having that slow U-turn, even just in general, just because you are a slower mon and you're going to be bulkier in a lot of weeks, I think that's really, really important. Or even on, like, Scarf offensive sets, having that ability to pivot is really important in my opinion, and it really helps you maximize your rain turns. So I think if you're going for, like, a rain team, I think that Pelipper is always the option. I do think Polytone is a very solid Pokemon, though. Setting the rain, it's a little bit bulkier just on its own. It's that more pure defensive water typing. It has, you know, some pretty cool gimmicky sets that it can run with, like the Paris trapping stuff. And it's pretty solid offensively, but I think if you're going for a rain squad, that Pelipper is your best bet. So now we have Mammal Swine, and Mammal Swine is an S tier Pokemon in tier 2, in my personal opinion. That's a sentence and a half. I love my boy Schwammel. This boy is ridiculously strong. It's dual stab of Ice and Ground. It's just notorious for being so ridiculous. You don't got your Rotom Heat. You don't got your Rotom Wash. Those two guys basically, I suppose, like Skarmy Core can check you. I'm thinking of things in the meta that switch into your dual stats, and there really isn't a lot because it's so good and it covers so much, and you have decent coverage and knockoff and Stone Edge for those potential fly types. Even though, excuse me, it's pretty late when I'm recording this. Even though Mammal Swine's obviously going to hit them with their Ice Jab, it's a great rocker because of how much switch supports it. And it has a great natural bulk. I think people really sleep on the bulk that Mammo has. I played against some really, really scary Mammo sweats. One in particular, I played against someone in APA Classic, the most recent season. And they brought a Curse Weakness Policy Mammo Swine. And it was really bulky, and it was meant to take advantage of a defensive Cloister, which was really scary. And I almost ended up losing to it. If I didn't, you know, Toxic and realize, oh no, it's cursing, it might be something scary. We could have been in a bad position, so I'm glad that I was able to handle that, but that was a really cool set back in my mind. Another set I've seen used to great success that I've used myself a bunch of times. I've drafted Mammal Swine plenty. But even my buddies that I've seen use it is AV Mammo. I think AV Mammo is incredibly underrated. With that fat HP stat, if you invest correctly, you're going to check a lot of things, especially those Pokemon that, you know, only can really hit you with those potential hidden powers. You're a great electric tech now, which I think is also, you know, really, really cool. I think Mammal Swine is an amazing Pokemon. It's a great offensive rocker. It's a great, you know, just strong breaker that forces so much prep out of its tier 2 slot. I think it's amazing. Great Pokemon. Next up, we got Slowking. If you know me, you know Slowking is near and dear to my heart. I love my, you know, fat regen cores. Slowking Tangrowth, which we'll get to in a minute, which is, you know, later on down this row. I absolutely love Big Tango. Sorry, I was checking if I was recording because I'd be so upset if I had to restart this. Yeah, so we are. But Slowking is near and dear to my heart. I love this Pokemon. In Gen 7, I used it plenty, and in Gen 8, it got nothing but better in getting Teleport, and I think it's definitely at least a Beatrice Pokemon in tier 2, and I think it's a great Spadef wall. I think it's great with an AV. Nasty Plot Trick Room sets are really terrifying. Calm Mind sets are really scary. This thing is really hard to break from the defensive, especially defensive side. It is a little bit lackluster on the Fish Def side, which can be a little bit iffy with your water type, as you're more so going to be relegated to checking those physically offensive Pokemon a lot of the time, just because a lot of them are going to be, you know, those grounds and those rocks and things like that. And a lot of the time they can too, it KO you, but you can get around that with proper team composition, in my opinion. Part of the reason why I really love Slowking Tangrowth, just because one covers that fat Spadef side and one covers that fat Fizdef side. And they're very annoying to try and break down if you, you know, pivot and play correctly with them. And again, Teleport, huge for this Pokemon, getting that guaranteed slow momentum. It's a great Trick Room setter for either itself or something really terrifying on your team. So I really do love Slowking. Oh, and great coverage, man. This thing has ridiculous good coverage because it's you know, an early gen Pokemon, so they're giving it Flamethrower and they're giving it, you know, all this crazy stuff that it probably shouldn't have, but it does, and you know, I'll definitely take it. I freaking love Slowking. Now, next up is Skarmy. Now, this is a Pokemon personally I'm not a big fan of, but I can't deny its greatness, and I'm gonna put it right here in A tier. I think Skarmy is a really good Pokemon, despite it not being mine necessarily, like, you know, favorite Pokemon draft. I don't like relegating a Pokemon to just being a hazard setter personally. I like, you know, obviously having the option to potentially hazard stack people, and I like, you know, the option just to have that Pokemon that can really set up spikes and rocks and potentially even defog and things like that. And it got Body Press this gen, but there's nothing but great for it. I think it actually got a lot better this gen. There's not Z-moves to break through it as easy. It's a great Fizz Def ball, which is obviously really nice, and it's a sturdy one, so you can always guarantee get up a layer, provided you aren't taunted or something like that. So I do think Skarmy is very, very good. Personally, I'm not a big fan. I like having a little bit more versatility on my mons, and personally I see Skarmy as like Fizz Def wall, hazard setter, remover. That's about it. You can run like cool curse sets or iron defense sets with the body press and things like that, but not the most versatile one. I've also seen like SD weak armor sets go crazy before. I think that's really cool. It's just not a Pokemon I've, you know, really had personal success with, so I can't really rate it too high. Next up, we got Kendra. Now, this is an interesting ranking, because I think if you have Rain, Kendra is up here. I think if you don't have Rain, I think Kendra is like down here. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to put it in A tier, just simply because of the fact that you do have to have a specific team and playstyle to have it thrive. Obviously, I mean, it can function outside of Rain. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's like useless outside of Rain, but it's not very good in my personal opinion. So, but with Rain, it's obviously terrifying. I'm using it in BBR right now, like I said, with the Pelipper, and it's really, really good, man. It's so strong. Draco Meteors and Hydro Pump thrown off in the rain with that Swift Swim ability is terrifying. You get access to Flip Turns, and now you have Momentum, which can be really nice under Rain. You got access to Hurricane to hit grasses even harder, and that's 100% accurate in the rain. So this Pokemon is the personification of Rain Sweeper. It is very, very good. I absolutely love Kendra. And it's potentially very scary if you end up playing against it, you know, on a rain team, and it forces a ton of prep. It's just, you know, if you don't have it, it's not that good. Next up, we got Celebi. Love me some, how do I feel about Celebi? I'm gonna put Celebi right here behind Slowking. I think it's a great Pokemon. I think it has a great utility. I think it's a great rocker. You get Swords Dance and Calm Mind and Nasty Plot and Earth Power now, and you get U-Turn for momentum and, you know, reliable recovery and recover. Your dual stats are pretty good, plus the Earth Power and things like that. My only issue, and it gets a Dazzling Flame for Darks, which is also really cool. My only issue is obviously that big 4x weakness to Bug. I know that's actually, honestly, I feel like that's a little bit too much of a, you know, contention point when it comes to Celebi than it should be. I think it's a little bit overrated of a statement, because U-Turn is, you know, obviously going to grab your opponent momentum regardless, but I think if you position Celebi correctly, it can be a very, very cool mon. It's incredibly bulky. A bulky Psychic is always nice. A bulky Grass type is always nice to resist those, you know, scary offensive grounds, provided they don't have, you know, have bug coverage like Excadrill or something like that. It can be very, very solid in my opinion. Man. But you always do have the option of a Tankabear. You always do have the option of Scarf. Very, very cool mon. I think it gets Healing Wish as well, which is very good utility. I think it's honestly pretty slept on. I think a lot of people really shit on Celebi for not good enough of a reason other than that U-turn weakness, which again really sucks, but it's not the worst thing in the world in my personal opinion. Next up, we got Big Crawdaddy, and I love Crawdad. I think it's a great. See, I feel like every Pokemon I've talked about here, I'm like, I love this Pokemon. I love Tier 2 though. I think it's such a slept on tier. I have so much fun with a lot of these mons. But we got Crawdad, and personally, I think as much as I love it, I'm gonna put it right here at the top of C tier. Now, Crawdad is a little bit match dependent. Now, it's ridiculously strong with the adaptability and then like throwing off big adaptability, crab hammers and liquidations and knockoffs and aqua jets and things like that. You get close combat now for coverage. It gets Sword Dance. It gets aqua jet. I mean, Dragon Dance. I already said it gets aqua jet, but it gets aqua jet, and I think it's really good. But it's very match dependent because of how mediocre his bulk is and how frail it is. If you're playing against slower, fatter builds, Crawdad is a beast, dude. And it's gonna look like a tier 1 Pokemon because your opponent's not gonna have one single switch into it. But if you're playing against a more fast offensive team, it's not as good in my opinion. Obviously, Banded Aqua Jets and things like that, or Life Orb Aqua Jets, picking things off is really nice. But you can be overwhelmed very quickly with Crawdad if you are playing, you know, a faster build. Excuse me, that can outspeed it and threaten it that way. So I'm going to put it at the top of C just because it's a little bit too matchup dependent for me personally. I do love it though. And again, I'm not saying like it's too matchup dependent for me to draft. No, I would draft it again in a heartbeat. I love Crawdad on the right team. Corfish and Little Cup too, Side Tangent is one of my favorite Pokemon as well. So definitely a really good Pokemon. Now next up we got Milotic. And personally, I'm going to put Milo in B. I think, and I'm going to put it behind Slowking. I prefer Slowking. Now, I know Milo is seen as like this unkillable wall. I don't think so, personally. I think it's a bit of taunt bait. It has a good speed tier as well, so it can outspeed some things. It has decent offenses. It has a competitive option for things like that. It's a great Pokemon. I don't think it's bad at all. I just think it's a little bit overhyped in its ability to be killed. If it's Flame Orb, it's taking a lot of chip in between turns and switching into those physical attacks, plus taking the burn. And being forced to recover a lot more, potentially a lot more taunt bait and things like that, which can be really solid. It's liable to be set up on by those faster taunt setup mons as well, which can be very, very scary. It does have Dragon Tail, but not the most reliable option, especially when subs exist as well, so you kind of get put in that 50-50. And it's just, with proper hazard support and proper momentum gaining moves and, you know, potentially, you know, really strong breakers that force it and things like that, I think Milo is a little bit more manageable than people think. I think it's still very, very good. I think it's, you know, almost the personification of bulky water. I think it's a very good Pokemon, but I think it's a little bit overhyped in my personal opinion. So I'm going to put a little lower. Now, speaking of overhyped, I'm going to put a little Ninetales in C tier. I'll put it at the top of C tier to be fair, but I think it's pretty ass. I'm not a big fan of this Pokemon. It's not very threatening offensively. Veil is obviously a great option in team support, but in a lot of instances, your opponent is going to over-prep like crazy for Veil, and in most matchups I see, Veil does not come into play very often. So I think outside of, you know, really aggressive hyper offense builds, the Veil option isn't as good in draft as really people think it is. And offensively, this thing just sucks, and defensively, it's even worse. Obviously, if you take away the Veil option, this Pokemon's really bad. So personally, I'm not a big fan of it. It obviously has its niche. It's very good on very offensive builds and, you know, setup, sweep, break, you know, kind of crazy builds like that. I'm just not the biggest fan of it, and the Hail option doesn't really help too much either, other than just chipping stuff down. There isn't really too many great viable Hail sweeper options, so me personally, I'm going to keep it down there. Next up, we got Venusaur. This is another point of contention, because it's a lot like Kendra, and like, if I'm thinking about it in rain, I mean in sun, I'm putting it up here, because this thing's terrifying. If I'm thinking about it just as a Pokemon, I'm putting it right here. It's not a tier 2 Pokemon. What I think I'm going to do is actually put this at the top of C tier. Again, I think it's great. I think the addition of Weather Ball is really nice for it, giving that really strong, well, the addition of Weather Ball plus Chlorophyll, having the ability to run those together is really, really nice for it, in all honesty. It gets Earth Power as well now for another option if you don't need to, like, you know, rely on that Weather Ball. It gets Growth, which is terrifying. It has decent defensive utility. It gives you a grounded poison, and it's really annoying to try and break through in specific matchups. But without that Sun option, it's just significantly less of a threat. And, you know, I don't see Sun as a reliable option as a weather, you know, playstyle as I do potentially like Rain and stuff like that. I mean, it's obviously more reliable than Hail, but it's smack dab in the middle, you know, for me personally. So I'm going to put Venusaur in C. I think it's a solid Pokemon, but I don't think it's amazing, if that's, you know, makes sense. Next up, we got Lucario. I'm going to put Lucario right behind Gyarados. I'm going to put it in B tier. I think this is a really fun Pokemon to use, especially if you're a very aggressive player. I think Lucario players can be very much so rewarded. I think it's great on sticky web builds. It has a plethora of setup options, and Nasty Plot, and Sword Dance, and Bulk Up, and Agility, and things like that. It's got great coverage, and it's got so much priority options as well. a really strong Pokemon, really hard to switch into. It's hard to find that opportunity to set up just because of your really mediocre bulk and your kind of subpar speed tier for such a frail Pokemon, in my personal opinion. But I think in the right hands, Lucario can be an absolute menace, and I think if you play aggressively enough with it, you position it well, and you get in on good doubles, you have screen support, you get in on that one Pokemon that can't OHKO it, you get up that Swords Dance, and you bullet punch extreme speed, close combat, Meteor Mash through everything. It's a good time. It's a really fun Pokemon to use. I really enjoyed using it. Megaluk is another Pokemon I got to use in Oversleep once, and that was a lot of fun as well. But yeah, next up we got Hippo, and I'm going to put Hippo right here. I love Hippo. I think it's such a good Pokemon. Even if you're not drafting Sand, that does not mean Hippo is not worth drafting. This thing is so ridiculously fat. It's such a reliable stealth rocker. It's decently strong in its own right. It's not passive in the sense that, again, it's pretty decently strong, and it also has action to Whirlwind and Roar. So two different options to potentially phase your opponent out and stop them from setting up in your face. Obviously, you're a little bit of taunt bait, but that's honestly circumventable with Hippo, because I do think it's, like I said, pretty decently strong, and you do have that edge quick coverage, like Ice Fang and things like that as well. You might get Fire Fang, I completely forget, but very hard Pokemon to kill, and it gets Slack Off. You have a bulky ground with reliable recovery. It's really hard to kill, and then it's obviously pretty solid as a Sand setter. Personally, when I get Sand, I'm drafting Gigalith, but Hippowdon's probably my second choice opposed to T-Tar, because T-Tar always wants to do other things. Hippo is definitely pretty solid in that role, but again, it doesn't need to be on Sand, which I think is very important for this. I think Hippo is phenomenal in or out of it. It's really annoying to kill on a lot of, bulkier balanced builds and stuff like that, so we're going to put it right there in A. Next up, we got Magnesium. Good lord, this is taking a long time. I should have gotten water before this. Goodness. So next up, we got Big Magnesium. I might get water after this. I think I'm going to get water after this. But we got Magnesium. Let's talk about Magnesium first. Now, obviously, Magnesium took a big hit this gen. Obviously, no hidden power really sucked for it. And its ability to trap potential steel types and things like that. Things like Ferrothorn that it trapped very easily with, like, Specs HP Fire. It doesn't do so as well anymore, which is very, very unfortunate. However, I still think it definitely has a lot of value. I'm going to put it, personally, in B tier. Yeah, I'm gonna put it in B tier. I really do like it. Still, it has access to body press, which I think is really cool with like iron defense sets. It's still very strong. You still have the analytic options, all giant flash cannons and volt switches and thunderbolts, either when you're slower or when you do force the switch, which can really chip things down. It's a very strong wall breaker. And no hidden power means a lot of Pokemon that you just check. They can't check on an HP ground just to knock you out. If they don't have that ground coverage, they don't have that ground coverage anymore. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. I think the sword's a little bit more pointy when it's pointing at Magnezone than it is pointing away with no HP ground, but very, very solid nonetheless. I think it's still very slept on. I think, honestly, people kind of sleep on a little bit more now just because of no, hidden power allowed for it, so I can't throw off that as HP fires, but a lot of the scary Pokemon that's here in the format, honestly, it still does potentially trap and things like that, because it's so ridiculously strong on its own. It, a lot of the time, didn't even need to click the hidden power. It's just kind of a luxury. But yeah, I will be right back. I'm going to go get a cup of water. There we go. Okay. I probably shouldn't have recorded myself drinking water. That was so geeky. Okay. Regardless, let's go ahead and jump into it. We, got to jump in on the perfect mod. Big Tangrowth. I freaking love this spawn. I'm going to throw an A. I know people are going to yell at me because they're going to say, Owen, Pokemon doesn't have hidden power anymore. It doesn't check as many things as it did before. Yeah, you're kind of right. You're kind of right. Honestly, it's really detrimental to things like, Kartana and Natdex is at the very least something I think of, where Tangrowth can honestly lose to, some potential SD sets and things like that, which is really scary, where last gen they could just throw on an HP Fire and just send it to the next dimension, but it's still so much defensive utility, being that FizzDev wall that can just pivot, and just never seem to die, throwing off Leaf Seeds, throwing off knockoffs, being able to sleep powder things, and potentially being an AV wall to where you can check things on the FizzDev side and on the SPDef side because you're so dang bulky. Without the AV, though, I will say you're obviously very, very frail on the SPDef side. So there's something you have to keep in mind. But AV isn't a bad option just because this thing has such great offensive coverage and it's not very, passive when it comes to the, offensive side of things, and it has strong coverage moves. I've seen like Life Orb Tangrowth before go crazy, which is really cool, just because it can always regen off that health. A lot of time with these fatter regen ones, you see them in a more defensive role, but people forget the offensive utility of, regen and Life Orb and things like that. Just don't have big hits, come them out, and then switch them back in at full, and repeat the process over and over again, which is obviously super clutch. So personally, I think that Tangrowth is amazing. I love Tangrowth. I think it's an amazing Pokemon. So we're gonna put it right up there. Next up, we got Togekiss. Again, it's hard for me to put some of these Pokemon S. Like, I love Togekiss. I think it's an amazing Pokemon, but I don't know if I would say it's S material. And the more I look at it, I think Starmie is an S. But we're gonna put Togekiss in A. I think it's an amazing fairy. I'm gonna put it on the top because I love him. I think it's an amazing Pokemon. I think it's really, really, really good. And obviously with the addition of heavy duty boots, it's a lot more annoying to kill. Being a Scarfer is really, really nice because you can throw a big air slash and just flinch everything down, or you can T-Wave and then flinch things down while still having the ability to switch up your moves, which is really nice. You can be Nasty Plus hits, you can be Defog, it gets access to Wish, it gets access to Cleric options. It's a really, really good just team support Pokemon, something to really glue your build together, and it's a great fairy type to really be able to again fill those holes and tie your team together, which I think is really important. For me personally, it's borderline S tier, but I think that's a little bit of personal bias shining through, so I'm going to keep it down there in A. Another Pokemon I really want to put in S. I love the Rotoms. I love the Rotoms so much. I love them so much, especially in Galar decks. I think they're so good. A lot of these Pokemon I freaking love. Okay. I'm going to put Rotom Heat in A. I think it's amazing. Obviously, it's a lot better this gen with the advent of boots. I will say, though, in drafting Rotom and using it and having a lot of fun with it, and thinking it's, obviously a great Pokemon, I did notice it's very, very pigeonholed into that boots role a lot of the time, which sucks because last gen you could run Scarf sets, you can run back when the Super Berries were still really good. Like Iapapa, I ran Iapapa Berry Rotom Heat more times than I can count. This is a Pokemon I drafted a lot before the advent of boots, so it's got a soft spot for me because now it's a lot better. I remember when it was like, a mid-tier 3 and people were like, I'm not a big fan of Rotom. I don't like having to keep the hazards off for my hazard remover. I gotta do that no more, which is obviously really good. Nasty Plot is really cool. Its dual stab is really scary to switch into. You got every hazard under the sun, which is obviously really cool. Now we also have Rotom Wash, and I'm gonna put Rotom Wash in S tier because again, this is another Pokemon. I love the Rotoms personally. I love Mo, I love Heat, and I love what do you call it? Wash right here. I like Fan a lot too. Actually, this gen I've had a lot of fun with Fan. I'm not a big fan of Frost, and I like Rotom Spook a lot too. So I'm a big Rotom guy. I think they're great. Just kind of fill all, filling holes in your teams and being a big nuisance. It's literally all the same points I had about Rotom Heat, except it's not pigeonholed into that boost roll, so you have more variability in your items. It's a great Scarfer because the dual stab of water plus electric is really hard to stop those volt switches when you don't want to switch it in your Powdon to get blown back by Hydro Pump. And again, the Rotoms are decently strong on their own. Nasty Plot is really, really solid. If only they gave Rotom Ice Beam, though. I think no hidden power kind of sucks for it. It's walled by a few things, but it's also very annoying to deal with. And like I said, they can just spam hazard, spam status, get rid of hazards, trick and cripple some fat walls, and be really, really annoying in all honesty. So I love Rotom. I think it's an amazing Pokemon. And in tier 2 and in draft especially, like Rotom Heat might be a little bit better in standard play right now and like OU and things like that. But I think in draft is where Rotom Wash really does shine. Now Dougie. Oh, people aren't gonna be happy with me for this one. I love Dougie. I've had so much fun using it in GDL this season. I've had so much fun using it. I think I'm gonna throw it. I don't think I can throw it any higher than A. As much as I really want to put it like really high in A, I think I'm gonna put it at the bottom. Just the thought of being able to trap your opponent and eliminate one of their threats just by existing is so nice. Just because of the amount of prep this thing forces, I think is really insane. And it can be really well utilized by a creative player who can, it really allows you to formulate some really unconventional win cons where you think like, I'm walled by this and this. Doesn't matter if they're not running Shed Shell, they're trapped by Dougie, and they're not running Lefties, they're not running this versus Berry, they're not Scarfed anymore. Things like that. Like my Gmax Alchemy, I think that is the biggest indication. I don't think my Gmax Alchemy in GDL right now would be doing half as good if I didn't have Dougie. Just the amount of prep it forces, and it obviously being able to trap those things. It's a great backup plan versus a lot of setup mons that are potentially getting up to +1 speed. If you're a Scarf Dougie, they're a little bit more frail, they're a little bit more weakened or something like that. You can revenge them and really stop a potential scary sweep from happening. And I think that's really, really awesome. It is a little bit weak. It's not the strongest thing in the world, but obviously the Gen 7 buff making it 100 base attack is really nice for it. And I think it really does just kind of patch up. Again, I say this a lot, but I feel like this is kind of big theme in Tier 2 is it really kind of fills the holes that the rest of your team can potentially leave and kind of glues it together a little bit. It's not going to be the Pokemon that leads your team in kills. It's going to probably go like 6 and 6 or 4 and 8 or something like that, but it's going to do its job on the bench, and it's going to do its job in the game if you're building with it and playing with it correctly. Next up, we got Seismitoad. Oh man, people are gonna get upset with me. So I think this is what I'm gonna do. We're gonna move these down a little bit because I think we're getting a little bit of separation from a lot of these Pokemon. But I'm gonna put Seismitoad and C's here. I think Toad is amazing. I think there's a little bit of hype within this generation though. Take a swig. I think there's a little bit of overhype with it. Obviously, in the early meta and stuff like that, especially in Sand Smoke on tiers, you think, oh no, Dracovish, I need water absorb Pokemon, and there's no rockers, so Seismitoad is good. Seismitoad was OU for months, which I think is so cool. However, I think that kind of really elevated its popularity and kind of made people think, like, this Pokemon's broken, it doesn't die, it's so good, it sets up rocks, it has good offensive coverage. All really true. I love Seismitoad. I think it's amazing. I love it in Gen 7, I love it in Gen 8. However, I think it's a little overhyped, honestly. Not having reliable recovery is a little bit tough. And obviously that 4x Grass weakness can come back to bite you. No hidden power, though. Really nice. So you kind of give and you take. I do think it still deserves a spot in Tier 2 this gen, just with no hidden power and being that water absorb Pokemon. Giving you an immunity, giving you a really good rocker, giving you a great, electric immunity and things like that. Being a good bulky ground, especially with proper wish support and things like that. Or even just rest talk. Or even just rest with cleric support. I think it can still be very solid in that sense. But I think it is a little bit overhyped, and I kind of wanted to touch on that a little bit at least. But yeah. Next up, we got Scolipede. Personal bias, don't care what you say. I'm putting Scully in S tier, in Tier 2. I think this Pokemon's so good. Especially depending on your league's rules. If they're allowing Baton Pass. No. Don't allow Baton Pass first. But Scolipede still so good. That speed tier, like I said, something above that 110 mark is really nice. And the speed boost ability, providing you just inherent speed control, is awesome. It gets access to two types of spikes, and Toxic Spikes and regular, which is really nice. It absorbs the T-Spikes for you. It's an SD sweeper. Endeavor sets are really cool. There's a lot of options. You could be a late game cleaner with just like Protect 3 attacks, Life Orb. It's a really, really good Pokemon that forces a lot of prep and is really, really threatening in the end game. And I think a good player can really make a lot of use of it, being that potential late game cleaner, or just using it as that, really solid hazards type of mon, leading it, getting off an Endeavor after getting up 2 spikes or something like that, and, being a general nuisance. So I do love Scolipede. Now, next up we got Crook, and I'm going to put Crook right here. I love Crook. I think it's a great Pokemon. God, I've said I loved all of these Pokemon. I'm the worst, dude. But we're going to put Crook right here in A tier. It's a great rocker. The Intimidate ability is obviously great. Just utility-wise, Moxie is great on Scarf sets, and that being said, it's a great Scarfer. It can be really, really strong in the end game. It gets access to Bulk Up, solid utility, in, like I said, Rocks and Taunt, and it gets access to Bulk Up for setup, and, a bunch of different options like that. I really do think it's a very solid Pokemon. It's not, again, the flashiest thing, but it always does its job, and in certain matchups, you might just be like, damn, Life Orb Crook goes crazy here. You bring Life Orb Crook, and it picks up 3 if you're positioning it correctly. So I think it's like the personification of a good Tier 2 Pokemon, in my personal opinion, especially in a more limited dex. Next up, we have Galarian Darmanitan Zen mode, and personally, we did this just to allow it, right? Because why not? This is draft. We can have cool complex bands like this, so Pokemon still get used. However, I really don't think it's very good. I'm not a big fan of it. We're gonna put it at the top of D tier, just because of the fact that in order to get that big buff, you do need to be below 50%. Otherwise, you kind of have a useless ability, and you're really frail. Otherwise, so it's kind of hard to get that utility out once you're below 50%. You're still viable to be revenged by Scarfers. And it's just really annoying to potentially have to deal with, unfortunately, in my personal opinion. I do like the dual stats, and I like the speed tier when it gets to that form. But prior to that, it's just a worse Darmanitan with the ice typing, unfortunately. And, a non-existent ability until you get to 50%. At least with regular Darm, while you don't have a great defensive typing, you're very, very strong with that sheer force boosted flare blitzes and rock slides and things like that. So I think regular Darm, which is what we're going to talk about next, I'm going to put it in C tier, is much better than G-Darm Zen mode. Obviously, if this is Guerrilla Tactics, never mind, because you can run Scarf Band, all these crazy things on it and really get crazy damage output. But regular Darmanitan, Pokemon I like a lot of drafted in APA. I thought it was great. It's a great Scarfer. It's great with the Life Orb. It's great with the Band. It's very hard to switch into. Even your water types don't want to take hits from this behemoth. It's very scared to deal with. It has cool options in Belly Drum, as does Zen Mode Darm. But again, for both of these Pokemon, I think it's very hard to pull off potentially. So while I think it's pretty solid in its own right, it definitely has its downsides. It's liable to be revenged by faster Scarfers. The hazards are a big issue. Rocky Helmets exist, which kind of invalidates Darm in some matchups. Just being able to click Flare Blitz into a Rocky Helmet isn't a fun idea when rocks are up as well. So I think if you have decent hazard control, or just if it's the right matchup, Darm can go crazy, but it is a little bit more matchup dependent. Now, right back up to S tier. Call me crazy. Reuniclus is an S tier Pokemon. I'm going to move him down. I love you, Rotom. I love you, Rotom, but I'm putting you up against these Titans, and I'm thinking they're so much better. Reuniclus, so scary. This Pokemon, outside of Mew, is just the essence of bulky Psychic that I can't kill, and it's setting up, and it's scary, and I don't know what to do because I didn't draft a Dark type. Reuniclus, in my opinion, is the Pokemon that made everybody realize I need to draft a Dark type on my team, or I'm going to lose to Reuniclus. Everybody, when they're drafting that Dark type, they're like, okay, do I lose to Reuniclus now? No? Cool. So if you ever go up against those teams that don't have that Dark type, it's honestly almost a free win for the Reuniclus player, which is really cool in its own right, but it has great utility outside of that. It doesn't have to be the bulky Double Dance Swan, or it doesn't have to be the bulky Calm Mind Sweeper. There's so many more options. AV is really nice because you also get access to regen on top of Magic Guard, so being able to pivot in and out, it can really utilize that well. Offensive sets with just Life Orb, or whether it be offensive Trick Room, which is my personal favorite Reuniclus set, that obviously saved us in a battle versus Steve, or AK Magnitude in BBR earlier in the season, and spoilers for bringing it in our game against Patty, which I think I'm uploading this before that. If not, you already saw it. But I'm bringing in my game versus Patty in BBR this week, upcoming week, tomorrow actually, if I'm uploading this on time. It's a really good set. I love OTR Reuniclus. It's such a good Pokemon. It's so strong, it's so fat, and it has great versatility. Or even just not being offensive Trick Room with, Trick Room 3 attacks. You can be Trick Room 2 attacks recover. You can be Life Orb 3 attacks recover and still be defensive and be just, generally scary. People think when they see Reuniclus, like, oh no, it's going to be Calm Mind, it's going to be Acid Armor, it's going to be Double Dance. It doesn't have to be, and I think a good Reuniclus player will realize that. Next up, we got a Mungus. I'm going to put a Mungus right here in B tier. I think it's a great Pokemon. It's a great pivot. It's very annoying. Spore is one of the best moves in the game. It's a little bit exploitable on certain matchups, but I think it's very solid if you're okay with having your Grass type not resist ground. But honestly, you can take on a lot of offensive ground just off of its sheer bulk alone. Obviously, Foul Play is really nice to combat physical, boosters, and just having Clear Smog as well is really cool. Spore, like I said, no hidden power makes you a little bit more liable to be, walled by some, really annoying Pokemon, potentially even Steel types and things like that, but still very good nonetheless. Next up, we got Arcanine, and this is a great Pokemon. I'm going to put it, right, it has boots now though, and I don't want to put it above Tangrowth. There's some sheer that making my, stomach hurt. I'm not gonna do it. You can't make me. This is my list. I love Arcanine though. I think it's a great Pokemon. Obviously, the advent of boots makes this thing so much more annoying to deal with defensively. At least in Gen 7, while you're like, dang, I don't break Arcanine very well. At least you can get up rocks, force into Morning Sun turns, and potentially take advantage of it that way. Now you can't really do that. It's a great Intimidate pivot, which is obviously really clutch. It has good offensive coverage too, with a decent speed tier. So being able to run offensive Arcanine is very, very nice as well. I know Automatic in the WB last week against Magnitude, a game I watched obviously doing the PRs with Shuckle, which if you haven't watched, definitely go check him out, because I did him too, on his side of the channel, and then they'll be up on my side this week. But regardless, he brought an offensive Arcanine, which is really good in the matchup, and I love to see it. It was Flare Blitz, it has access to Wild Charge and Play Rough and Extreme Speed and, Crunch and, a bunch of cool different options. Morning Sun, reliable recovery, can Will-O-Wisp things down. It's a general, really annoying Pokemon to deal with, and I think that's really nice for it. And defensive fires are much better this game. This generation, which I think is really nice. Next up, we got Haxorus. Man, I'm realizing how top-heavy my list is, and how much I'm hyping up all of these Pokemon. It's like, there's very few of these that I'm like, nah, I would never draft them. I love Tier 2, and I have so many buddies who tell me, like, oh, I hate this tier. This tier is full of bad Pokemon. You're wrong. But, woo. Next up, we got Haxorus. I think Haxorus is great. I think it's another pretty setup, matchup and setup reliant mon, but it's so scary on that setup option. And I think that Bandit is a really cool option. I think Scarf is a really cool option. First Impression was a cool buffer this gen. I had it in GDL Season 1, and it was on my Killer. I think it was second on my team, only to Big Daddy Kingler. Was really, really strong. A lot of weeks I didn't even bring setup. I brought Life Orb for attacks. I brought Bandit. I brought Scarf. But obviously, the Dragon Dance option is great. Swords Dance is also another really cool option, especially when it did get access to Scale Shot this gen, which is a physical Dragon type move that will boost its speed. So you can pull off cool double dance sets with SD Scale Shot and things like that. And really run through teams. You have Poison Jab to potentially hit fairies, as well as Iron Tail, I think. Earthquake to hit steals, and Close Combat to hit steals, and a bunch of cool options like that. Very, very strong and scary Pokemon in all honesty, and I think it's really, really good. It has also two good abilities, an Unnerve and Mold Breaker, to potentially, catch your opponent's, lure that they're trying to, there's Sylveon that has Kevia. It's not going to work against Haxorus, or their Rotom Wash that's supposed to check it, or their Rotom Heat or something like that. Though those aren't the best checks in Valor, you can obviously hit those with an Earthquake, and just kind of examples that I can think of off the top of my head at the very least. Next up, we got Mienshao. I'm going to put Mienshao on the top of C tier. I do love me some Mienshao. I think it's a great Pokemon. I think it's very slept on. Regen, again, very, very good ability, and this is a more offensive Pokemon that takes advantage of it, which I think is really, really cool, just because of the fact that you can, be that Life Orb offensive set and really not have to take much chip. But AV is also very good. Fake Out for priority. It gets Swords Dance. It gets, I know it gets Calm Mind, though. It doesn't use it very often. Special coverage is garbage. But it gets like Poison Jab. It gets obviously access to U-Turn to pivot. Very solid mon overall. I think it's just a little bit overshadowed by a lot of the really good Pokemon in this tier, so we're going to keep it a little bit lower. Next up, we got Bisharp, and Bisharp, I'm going to put it in C tier as well. I think Bish is another really good Pokemon. I don't have too many bad things to say about it, other than it's not the best defensive Steel type. I like my Steel types to resist Fairy. Bisharp's not, so you're gonna kind of have to circumvent that. Some offensive fairies could be very scary and things like that. It's a 4x fighting weakness, which is also not a very good time, but it's very scary offensively. You have the Defiant ability, so I think on like Hazard Stack more, offensive builds and things like that, you could potentially be very, very scary for those teams to deal with. Sucker Punch is the priority. Swords Dance is an option. You have access to Rock Polish as well. I once got swept by a weakness policy Rock Polish Bisharp, which is a crazy set that I remember I got swept in by Shawnsters once, which was, really eye-opening. I was like, damn, I didn't even know this thing got Rock Polish. But it does. You just don't see it very often. It's a good rocker. Very solid mon. It just doesn't have the best defensive utility. It has a bit of a subpar speed tier, so I can't really put it above a lot of these mons that I think are a lot better, in my personal opinion. Mandibuzz, another Pokemon that I don't really like, but I can't deny its greatness. We're going to put Mandibuzz in A tier. I have used Mandy before, and I, didn't hate it as much as I thought I would. I'm not great with passive mons. Mandibuzz is a little bit, of an exception to that rule, in my opinion. It's a great defog. It gets Taunt. It gets U-Turn and Foul Play and Brave Bird and things like that, which are obviously really, really cool. And it's decently fast for a more bulky Pokemon as well, so you can potentially, avoid those taunts. You can potentially taunt them, which is obviously really good. It's a very annoying Pokemon to kill, and it's a great just pivot, get it in, U-Turn it out to get into something scarier. So I think it's a very solid Pokemon. It is forced into a Boots roll a lot of the time this gen, but is that really a big deal when Boots are so good? Not having to worry about Self-Rock on your defensive flying type is ridiculous, especially when you can just roost off all any damage anyways. I think it's a really solid Pokemon, despite me kind of thinking it's a bit meh. Next up, we got Colt Valiant. I'm going to put Colt Valiant right in D tier. Love the Commander. Word to Milan. Shouts out to my boy. This is a great Pokemon. It's a great rocker. It's great with the Swords Dance and Rock Polish and Calm Mind. It gets Volt Switch for momentum. It gets Taunt as a potential option stuff as well. I believe it gets Thunder Wave as well, which is really cool. It's a great utility mon. It's a great, potential win con some matchups. It does lack that immediate breaking power, which is a little bit unfortunate, but it has a good speed tier. And, after an SD, you can potentially put in a lot of hurt. It has a big problem, though. The thing holding me back with it, one, is obviously its lack of initial breaking power. And then, kind of the same thing as Bisharp, where it is a steel type that does not resist Fairy, which is very unfortunate. It is a good Fizdef, bulky Fizdef wall. Excuse me. Which is very annoying, but for some teams to break, it's a little bit frail on the Scuda side, but I've also seen AV put in some work. I think it's a really solid overall utility mon, Gloomon 13, and potentially a good win con and some potential matchups and things like that. Next up, we got Big Diggersby, though. And I'm gonna put Diggersby, not in D. Don't yell at me. Don't worry. I'm trying to think of where I want Diggersby. I think it's very scary offensively. It just has such a subpar C tier, and the loss of return really did suck. I'm gonna put it in C tier. I'm sorry. Yeah, I love Diggersby. I think it's a great Pokemon. It's so hard to switch into. Body Slam and Mega Kick are still options. It gets Quick Attack, it gets U-Turn, it gets Spikes, which is really cool. It's a cool offensive spiker that a lot of people sleep on. Swords Dance and Agility and Elemental Punches and a bunch of cool stuff. But losing that really reliable stab and return / frustration was really unfortunate for me personally. And it does have that really subpar speed tier where it's forced into a Scarf a lot of the time, and it's gonna be outpaced by pretty much any other Scarfer. So I'm unfortunately gonna put Diggersby in C tier. But don't worry, we have a lot of really good Pokemon that we're kind of jumping into right here that are all gonna take up like top spots on the list here. Stay hydrated. Ugh. This has been a long recording session. Good lord. And I played a couple games today, so I recorded those. So don't yell at me for drinking water and yawning every 2 minutes. But next up we got Sylveon, and call me crazy, I think Sylveon is an A tier Pokemon in tier 2. I think it's really good. Do I prefer? Yeah, I'm gonna put it right here. I love Sylveon. I think it's very good. I think Mystical Fire was a cool, addition to its moveset. Obviously, losing Hidden Power, you're like, oh no, I'm gonna be walled by Steel types. Nope, thank you, Game Freak. I appreciate that. That was really nice of you. It's a great Wish Passer. It's a great Cleric. It gets access to Baton Pass for momentum if your league allows that. Calm Mind is really, really scary. Specs is terrifying. If Specs or offensive Sylveon has the right matchup, it's not going to be a good time for your opponent. It's going to be really, really hard to pivot into and switch into and things like that. Just a great team support mon, and having a good fairy is always a really good option. So from one fairy to the next, we're going to put Primarina right in B tier. I'm going to put it right behind Milo. I think it's a great Pokemon. The fairy and water typing is phenomenal. It resists a lot. Unfortunately, you don't have any reliable recovery, which I guess you get Life Dew, but that's not reliable recovery. It's a very, very solid Pokemon. It's very hard to switch into. If you've ever tried to build for a Primarina, you'll realize, man, how in the world do I switch into this thing? Stabs plus Ice Beam or like Energy Ball or something like that. Just terrifying. It got access to 2 cool things this gen. One being Calm Mind, which we knew about before, and it having Calm Mind is really, really terrifying against fatter builds. Can really just break through a lot of teams, and being able to switch up your moves while having that Specs type boost, terrifying. And then 2 is Flip Turn, which it just recently got, and I think Flip Turn Primarina is awesome, especially for like AV sets or even Spec sets or even Scarf sets that can come in some match, something like that. Grabbing momentum with this thing is great. It's a great user of Rest Talk shenanigans and things like that. I really do like Primarina. I think it's a really solid mod. The only thing that really holds it back for me is just not having that reliable recovery. But other than that, it's just an overall great Pokemon. I guess minus no recovery and the pretty subpar speed tier, but still very good. Next up, we got Lycanroc Dusk. I'm gonna put Lycanroc Dusk right here in A tier. Ahead of Dougie. I love this Pokemon. I've drafted this Pokemon a million times since Gen 8 started, or since it was added to the game. I don't know why. I just always drafted. It's a good offensive rocker, has a good speed tier, plenty of priority options, and obviously the Cell Rock and the Sucker Punch and things like that. It got Close Combat this gen. It got Play Rough this gen. Stone Edge is hurt. What do you call it? And it just has a plethora of coverage options that can Swords Dance and break through teams. And the Tough Claws boost makes this thing's a Cell Rocks and Close Combats hit like a truck. It's a mini faster Tarak with less bulk and less less power, maybe. I don't know exactly how the clouds line up, but it's a little bit less bulky and doesn't have the opportunities to set up as much. But it's a good wall breaker, and it's a really fast rocker. I like the Taunt Endeavor sets. Endeavor plus a Cell Rock is pretty cool because it pretty much always net you KO on lead unless you're playing against a Ghost type or something like that, which is obviously really, really cool. And like I said, it has access to SD, which makes it a really good late game cleaner if you can position it correctly. Now we got Silvally. Now I'm a big Silvally fan. I'm gonna put Silvally right here in B tier. I love this thing. I think it's great. I love it in a draft setting being able to say I lose to this Pokemon, so let me make a Pokemon potentially, depending on the calcs and what the Pokemon is, but in a blanket sense, let me make a Pokemon to check the thing that I just auto lose to right now. I think that's incredibly valuable. It's a great defogger. Parting Shot is an amazing move, and it also gets U-turn for potential shenanigans if you need to do that, which is really nice. It gets access to Swords Dance and Flame Charge. It has great physical coverage and special coverage, and that multi-attack buff makes this thing a threat offensively, which is so nice. And just being able to have any type in the game out of one Pokemon is so incredibly valuable, in my opinion. With great natural bulk, decent natural speed, and decent natural attacking stats, this thing's really solid. I think it's great. Next, D-Ray and John are gonna yell at me. This Pokemon's ass. I'm sorry, I really don't like Mimikyu. I remember in like Gen 7, the early Gen 7, people had it like Tier 1. I think this Pokemon sucks. I think the Disguise is obviously a really cool ability, and it really, facilitates some scary endgames potentially in some certain matchups. I think it's definitely a Tier 2 Pokemon, don't get me wrong, but I think it's incredibly overhyped. It's very weak, it's very frail, and it has a pretty bad speed tier. It's just that amazing ability really holding it together, which, to be fair, like I said, it can win in a lot of matchups. It definitely has some decent utility outside of that. Like, I've seen Curse sets go crazy. I've brought in a Curse Mimikyu set before that was able to beat down things like I think it was an Arceus normal and like an unrestricted Uber Caesar, which was obviously really cool to see Mimikyu beating that. But very cool Pokemon overall, just in theory, but in practice, it just always comes with short. It just misses that KO. It just, it just gets outsped. It drops to this hit. It gets to a KO by this while not picking off this Pokemon. Shadow Sneak isn't strong enough if you're not Life Orb, but then you're going to chip down. And, I've just seen so many problems when I've seen people use Mimikyu. It's just not a Pokemon I personally like, in my personal opinion. Next up is Cinderace. People are going to yell at me. I think Cinderace is an S tier, Tier 2. Really good Pokemon. So fast, so strong, U-turn. This is obviously non-Libero Cinderace. Libero Cinderace is definitely a tier banned Pokemon. It's not allowed in my non-Uber leagues. No. And on my S tier league. It might be allowed in my S tier league too, but not in my standard leagues. No. Sure, /Mayhem/ no, not gonna happen. But very good Pokemon. I've drafted this a ton here in Gen 8. It's a great utility mod. I think Boots are great for it. Makes it a really annoying pivot. Bulk Up is a great option to get Sucker Punch for priority. Court Change is an amazing move, just, in theory, forcing your opponent to think, like, do I want to bring Hazard Stack versus my opponent because they can just put it on my side of the field? That's dumb. Like, that's such a dumb move, in my personal opinion, especially in a draft setting. And it just, forces a lot of Hazard Stack just to not come versus you, in all honesty, which is terrifying, to, potentially have to, deal with that, being like, I can't really set up my spikes, even though they're so good versus my opponent, because they're also really good versus me, and I don't want to deal with it. Yeah, that's, it's definitely pretty crazy, in my opinion. But, like I said, Bulk Up, it's strong, it's fast, and the Boots option's great. It can be Banned, it can be Life Orb, it can be Scarfed even, it can be a lot of options. I've run AV Cinderace before. Great Pokemon. I think it's super slept on as a whole. And I think it's one of the best tier 2s as a whole, definitely. I'm going to put it above Starmie. Sorry, Starmie. Next up, we have Scuda, and I'm also going to put Scuda in the B tier. Before this, I probably would have put it in C, maybe ID, because it was the definition of I'm good on rain. That's it. Now, not as much. Now it gets access to Flip Turn, so now it's just a really, fast offensive pivot out of your Water type, which can be useful, though 98% of the time I still like you're still going to see this on rain, unfortunately, just because, you can kind of cover your typings and things better without picking up non-rain Scuda, but it's still definitely viable. Like, I'm not going to see someone draft non-rain Scuda and go, what's wrong with this guy? I'm going to say, like, oh, it's interesting. Let's see how it works. Like, it's still a very solid Pokemon with the Flip Turn option, in my opinion. It's very strong. It's very scary on rain, so we're going to put it in B tier just simply because of how menacing Banded Liquidations and Flip Turns are coming off in the terrain. In the rain and stuff like that. But without it, it's probably like a D tier Pokemon. Maybe low C, but with it, it's probably an A tier Pokemon. So we're gonna kind of meet in the middle here. For Scuda, kind of put it at the bottom of B. And then next up, we got Hatterene. I'm going to put Hatterene in D tier. Personally, I don't think Hatterene is very good. I've drafted myself and I've enjoyed it. I don't think it's like, a bad Pokemon. There aren't any Pokemon in this tier that I think are just objectively bad, which I think is cool. The reason I put Hatterene in D is, one, because it's a fairy without reliable recovery. Two, it's a fairy that does not resist dark, which can be very unfortunate. It's a little bit slower. It's not the bulkiest thing in the world. It's got decent natural bulk, but not enough bulk to be a consistent switch into a lot of things, which can be really, iffy. Even though you 4 times resist fighting, you're not the most reliable fighting check, because like a knock and a poison jab later, you're dead. So that can obviously be really, really scary. It's a decent hazard deterrent with the Magic Bounce ability. It's a great Trick Room setter. Healing Wish is an awesome option. Good lord, it is getting not even that late. It's 10 o'clock, but I'm tired. And then it's, you know, got decent utility, though. I would always draft a different fairy personally after trying it. It doesn't really fit that role that I want. Next up and lastly, we got Limpy Dimpy. Grimmsnarl, word to John Jr. He's gonna get mad. If he ends up watching it this far or something, he's gonna be mad that I ranked Limpy Dimpy. But I'm gonna put it in B tier. I do really like Grimmsnarl. I'm gonna put it right here. I like Grimmsnarl a lot. I think it has decent defensive utility. I think the Prankster option with T-Wave and screens is obviously really nice. It's really strong on its own offensively too, with good coverage, and its dual stabs plus like Fire Punch and Drain Punch and, you know, different options like that. Bulk Up is a great option. I've run AV Grimmsnarl plenty of times this generation too, to check some scary, especially offensive threats and things like that. Sucker Punch for priority as well on the, you know, attacking side. Very, very solid, you know, potential, you know, hole patcher and things like that for a team. And, you know, potentially really good in that sense. You should find a good fighting check, though, outside of this thing, because, again, you're a fairy type that doesn't really check fighting types, which can be pretty scary. But I digress. It's still an option, and, you know, you're decently bulky, especially if you invest correctly. And the screens option is just so nice for any team that's, you know, somewhat offensive. I think it's honestly worth grabbing. But that's going to be the tier list. Let me know how much you disagree. There's a lot of personal bias to shine through. And, again, this is a tier that I personally love. I love tier 2. I know a lot of people feel differently and say, like, I never know what to take in tier 2 because all the Pokemon suck. I disagree wholeheartedly. These have some of my favorite Pokemon in this tier, and I think, you know, with proper building and proper team support, some of these Pokemon can either really patch up your team or really just kind of elevate it to that next level. And, you know, I hope I kind of gave you a little bit of insight on my thoughts on a little bit of these things. And let's have a discussion. Let me know what you think about them. But yeah, with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, if you're new here, if you've been watching the video for weeks and, you know, you just haven't clicked that, you know, red subscribe button down there right below the video, please hit it for me. It lets me know that you're enjoying my content. It's completely free, and it would really help me push towards my goal of 400 by the end of the year. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you guys in the next one. Later.